All right, everybody, Stocks by the Numbers, welcome back. And we're about to go into the close here on Friday. I hope everyone had a nice, profitable week. I hope it was productive for everybody. I'm looking at a stock right here that we spoke about multiple times here. We do have earnings coming up inside of the next couple of weeks, and I know this is a smaller cap company that everyone was pretty hyped about, so I try to keep an eye on it and give you guys updates every couple of weeks, every month or so. Name of the company, STEM Inc., ticker symbol STEM, listed here on the New York Stock Exchange. This is a company that basically develops technology for clean energy. And right now the stock trading here at 301 a share, down 7 cents, a little over 2.25% here on the day. The high of the day here at 302, and you can see we have this long wick with this potential candle body here at the top. So if the company does close at 302 or even 1 or 2 cents higher there and closes right there at the top, that would actually technically be making a bullish hammer for the day, and we can see a potential little pop if that happens, right? Because as we see last time this happened here, Friday, January 19th, looks like a bull hammer, and then boom, we ran up to almost 3.5 there. So I know everyone's kind of potentially getting upset with this situation because we, in my opinion anyway, I speak pretty highly about it. And of course, as we can see, the stock has been kind of stepping down here the last couple of weeks. So I know some people may be down. You may have an average price, an average cost of, $3.5, $4 and change. But again, just remember, we saw a big jump here in revenue. As you see, the quarter before, the company doing less than 100 million in revenue. Estimates exploded up to north of 180 million. The company posts only 133 million. And initially it was viewed as a potential negative, right? But then the company came out and they just let everyone know, hey, listen, by the way, we got $1 billion plus backlog going on. So that's why I feel that over time, this one, in my opinion, is really going to consistently keep growing, even though the company just missed earnings. Looking here, we can see that earnings set for February 28th after the close, expecting a loss of 14.6 cents a share and coming in with revenue a little over 256 million, right? So we jumped up from 90 million, doubling to 180 million estimate, now jumping up even further, almost 50% higher, up to 256 million. So going to be hard to tell whether the company comes in line with this revenue estimate, especially since they missed last quarter by a chunk. However, again, in my opinion, this is more of a longer term play as opposed to a shorter term play. We looked at the forecast that the company was laying out over the next couple of quarters, next couple of years, and we know that now the company is going to really start rocking and rolling with the business that they do. And again, even though they missed last quarter, that chunk up in revenue, definitely nothing to sneeze at, going from 93 to 133. I mean, we're talking about what, roughly like a 40% increase in revenue. So you can see, I just want to bring you guys back a couple of months ago, the last time this happened, right? So initially we had the little bit of a pump here, you can see up to 385 it's showing us. And then we began selling off and chunking down here to the low twos. And I know that probably upset a lot of people. However, again, when you're playing for these long-term situations, as I always said, you need to remain stoic. You need to put the emotions to the side, and you have to expect short-term volatility for longer-term growth, right? So initially, the company came out, they missed on the revenue side, but they mentioned the billion plus backlog. And again, you can see high threes down to low twos, right? But then what happened? The stock goes from these lows here of 233 and runs up to 430 technically after an earnings miss, right? Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal. However, the way I'm looking at it is, as you can see, after earnings came out, the high was 385. And then after going down, it makes this beautiful V recovery and goes even higher than where it initially was when they posted and reported those earnings, and gets up to north of $4 a share. So that's why I'm saying, I feel like, in my opinion, with a lot of these situations, not to go down the rabbit hole, but I feel like depending on the situations, sometimes I feel like Wall Street will beat the stock up initially when we feel it should be rewarded. And then what happens is people get emotional, they get upset that it doesn't immediately work out, so they will actually liquidate their shares down here at, in my opinion, what is a discounted price. And then Wall Street obviously begins to reward the company with the excess news that they brought in, right? So what am I saying? What I'm saying is the company set to report these Q4 earnings end of this month, and of course give an outlook for 2024 moving forward. So in my opinion, even if the company potentially misses here on the EPS and on the revenue side and comes in light, I still think that they're going to forecast potentially bigger and better things moving forward for 2024. So again, even if the company wants to continue to drop down here sub 3 and kind of stay in this channel here going into earnings, yes, it's going to suck because the stock is going to drop, potentially breaking this trend line that I drew out here at about 282, I want to say, and it could potentially continue to drop down here, maybe even to 260. You got a fib here at 269, so it could very well get to the low 260s. But also at the same time, I think that, in my opinion, I think we're going to start to see some momentum coming out of these earnings because, again, even if they come in light here and post, like 200 million, 212 million or something like that, first of all, it's going to be a substantial increase still quarter over quarter, even though the company is coming in light. And this is why I think Wall Street also kind of ended up rewarding it a little bit later, gave it a couple of weeks to cool off, and then started to pump and rise up the stock because, again, even though initially it could be viewed as negative, we're talking about jumps in revenue, excuse me, from 90 plus million up to over 130 million. And again, I picked a number out of the air, but let's just say like 210 million. I mean, you're going from 90 to 130 to over 200 million. You know what I'm saying? So even though initially it's going to be viewed as a potential negative, again, if we assume the company comes in light on revenue, it could potentially be viewed as the initial negative. However, I just think the overall story and the longer term growth, I just think that any drop we see here in the short term may potentially be erased moving forward, in the further months there for the longer term. So I still say, in my opinion, we're going to meet up with this trend line here, and I'm not exactly sure when it could happen, but as you see, if it does happen here, we'll give it, like a week or so after these earnings take place, a week or two. You can see we're looking at about 4.5 again if this continues downward. Obviously, it didn't immediately run up to this trend line after last earnings report. They're trying to keep the stock down, but again, in my opinion, I still like this one long term. We spoke about this multiple times here. And again, the company's set to post over $250 million just for this quarter alone. And right now, the value of the company is showing $468.5 million. So, in my opinion, like I always say, with these smaller cap companies, I feel that the revenue is more key than the profitability side, the EPS side. But in my opinion, I still say, especially at this level, I do think that the stock is undervalued. And that's why I think even if it bounces around here and drops before it rallies a little bit, I do still conservatively think that here in the short term, in the next month or so, we could potentially regain that 4.5 and potentially see $5. Now, of course, it depends what the company is going to forecast. However, again, looking year over year, the growth cannot be denied here. The company going from tens of millions here in 2020, posting 36 million. Following year, 127 plus million. Following year, almost 363 million for the year of 22. And now the company is set to post around an estimate of 256 million just for the quarter, when last year in total they brought in 363 million. So this is why I'm saying, in my opinion, I like to follow the money, I like to follow the numbers, and I like to look at just the revenue coming in, because if the revenue is consistently increasing quarter over quarter, year over year, in my eyes, as long as the company is not completely leaking and bleeding millions like crazy, then chances are it's probably going to work out in the longer run. But of course, anything can happen. We know that the company could come out with some negative news. The stock could take a big hit. We could drop down here into the low 2s. We know that anything can happen. But again, for the longer term, here, even in the low 4s or here in the mid to low 3s, and of course, even if it potentially drops down to the low 2s. Overall, in my opinion, I am seeing some nice growth here over the long term in the numbers in STEM. So, again, to reiterate, you may have to deal with some short-term volatility when looking for that long-term growth. But again, we can see high 302 here. Currently, the stock trading at 301. So if it gets up to 302 and closes there, we could potentially have that bull hammer and Obviously, if it gets up to 303 or 304 and closes at that point, then of course we could have a potential pop maybe back up here to the mid Bollinger Band at 320. However, we can see that basically since the ball drop, the stock has been rejecting the mid Bollinger Band on multiple occasions. However, the fact that it consistently tries to retest that level, in my opinion, I actually view that as a positive, not necessarily a negative. But even coming down here, we have a low on this candle here of 263, right? So if the company, if they want to bring the stock down here towards the bottom Bollinger Band here on the daily of around 260, it may potentially only get to that 263 level and potentially form that double bottom, and then we could rally back up into the threes from there. But of course, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The MACD did basically flatten out, and we can see across to the downside. However, it's just hugging along that red line, and that's why I think that, in my opinion, we may potentially get some momentum soon coming into the stock. Now, it might not happen, first thing Monday or Tuesday morning, but I have a feeling that even if they slightly bring it down here towards the mid or higher twos, I think that maybe about like the week before going into those earnings, the end of February, I think we may have some momentum coming into the stock, some volume coming in, people anticipating those higher revenue numbers coming in for the quarter. So, obviously we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I'm just, throwing out how I potentially see this one working out. RSI sitting here basically middle of the road. We're sitting here at about 44. Again, we can see over time as we kind of approach that 30 benchmark, we have bounces here on the stock. You can see a bounce there. As it comes back down, you can see maybe about 32, 33, we had that nice bounce up. And of course, it doesn't technically ever hit, recently anyway, going back as we see here just to the middle of August. But looking here at the last roughly 6 months, we can see that it doesn't necessarily hit these marks really to the T. However, it does stay in this range. So right here, middle of the road here on the daily RSI. So in my opinion, a little tough to call exactly where it's going to go first thing Monday or Tuesday. But again, in the longer term, personally, I still like it. Even here, RSI on the weekly as well. You can see that markets were pulling back here. Stock was selling off early 22. This was the first time, as we see, that the RSI dipped below that benchmark of 30. And then, of course, began to climb up and kind of just step its way higher. And you can see we had a little bit of a rally there coming off of that bottom RSI level. And then we had a little kind of consolidated range. And you can see it tried to test that mid-Bollinger Band multiple times and then eventually popped up and broke out. And the 50-day moving average now, as we see, has been seriously selling off over the years, coming all the way down here now to 481. However, again, it almost reminds me of a Fubo, right? However, Fubo, we know, had the reverse stock split, so we can appreciate why they were getting beaten up. But, you go back to Fubo and the company, they had some bleeding, they had losses, the EPS was coming in below expectations, revenue was coming in slightly light. They didn't catch their footing yet. They didn't find that bottom, and they weren't able to right the ship and kind of show us that U-turn in the chart, right? So the whole time Fubo was going down, I'm sure a lot of people forgot about it and just thought it was going to be, a stick in the mud. And what happened was, again, Fubo got beaten all the way down up to like $1, it dipped below $1, and then all of a sudden it began to slowly run up. They got the bleeding in order, and of course revenue began coming in, chunking in, and coming in above analyst expectations. That added momentum to the stock, and of course recently signing a deal with Nexstar Media, ticker symbol NXST, and as of right now, it appears to just be like small positive catalyst after small positive catalyst for Fubo. And again, quick update on Fubo. Even selling off from its highs, the stock is still up here at about 2.5. So even from when we first initially looked at it here on this channel, the stock, again, trading at about $1. And now, again, you can see that even with the sell-off from the highs there of almost $4, the stock's still sitting at $2.56. So even if you still held on this entire time, you're still up over 150%. And we're talking about long-term capital gains as well, not necessarily short-term cap gains, but of course that depends when you sell. But we can see that even though the stock has been stepping down and rejecting off of this mid-Bollinger Band the last several weeks, you can see that the MACD appears to not want to really cross to the downside. I'm telling you, in my opinion, based on the way the revenue is chunking in here as of late with this company, and the fact that like this whole downtrend and sell-off was essentially waiting for these upcoming quarters now, where revenue was really chunking in to potentially U-turn it and run it back up. I still say, in my opinion, this is a high single-digit stock, if not a low double-digit stock. So, in my opinion, I mean, a conservative price target of even like 7 and change or $8. I think it's extremely feasible. I do think it's extremely feasible. And in the long term, if the company now is able to consistently start bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars per quarter, now we're talking about 900 million for the year, a billion plus for the year. And again, the current market cap, less than $500 million, right? So even if we bring this market cap up to about a billion and change, I mean, we're talking about roughly a $7 stock. Right? So again, this is just my opinion. Obviously, if you guys, if you see something I don't see, if you agree, if you disagree, please let us know down in the comments section. That's what it's for. But we'll check the pivot points quickly. Yeah, on the weekly, not much. And again, given a potential good report and a very positive outlook moving forward for the company in 2024, we could potentially get back to this pivot point here of 586, given some months, in my opinion. And switching over here to the daily, you can see key pivot point there, 319. It looked like the stock was really fighting to hold that level. And again, you can see we dipped down here. So, of course, a drop down here to this next support level of 239. Again, I can appreciate the fact that that's really going to suck. However, we would have the potential to reach this level. Again, what was the low here? 233. So that's what I mean. We could potentially retest this support, but if they might flash crash it down a couple of cents here to 233 and actually form the double bottom themselves and cause it to gain some bullish momentum and have a nice rally back up into the threes. But of course, only time will tell. But like I always say, if I liked it here at 3, I'm going to love it down here at 230, and you can see that this low 3 level seems to be a pretty key pivot point here. Even dipping down here, we're looking at what, 283 again. And if we come back here, look, 283, right? That trend line there again. So this going from the bottom of this candle here on November 28th, 2023 as a point of reference. And I was just drawing out these support trend lines, just connecting to the bottoms of a lot of these candles and a lot of these moves, and you can see that these are the key levels that the stock has been bouncing off of, right? And even this one I drew out recently connecting to that bottom, and you can see it broke out slightly below that trend line and then of course formed the bullish hammer, and that's where the momentum, the upward momentum came from, and we saw that rally back up to 3.5, right? And now this red trend line here connecting the tops going back to December 26th to 23, touching January 12th, 24, and then, of course, the top of the body of the candle, January 24, 2024, and you can see how it's connecting now. Of course, this is all recently. I drew this out, about 2 weeks ago, but you can see that it's trying to fight and get above that resistance level, but it keeps rejecting, and in my opinion, I just think that everyone's waiting for this quarter to come out here. So, if you're really asking me, in black and white, is it going to go up or is it going to go down? In the immediate short term, honestly, I don't know. And it does appear to be potentially pulling back and selling off and downtrending here. So we could, again, have a pullback here to the higher or potentially mid twos in the next couple of weeks. However, in the longer term, to reiterate, I still say that, in my opinion, a company growing its revenue the way that STEM Inc. has been doing, going from 36 to 127 to 363 million, now estimates of 256 million just for this quarter alone, in my personal opinion, I think it's a screaming buy. And I'm going to end it there. So once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you all for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually very quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But of course, more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are very rocky, they're very volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thanks for stopping by. You all have a great weekend, okay?